Luke 12. Oh, man. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised. I got some emails today of hearing from people that weren't going to be out of town or not able to be out tonight. And we have a pretty good crowd tonight. Warren's down for our opening prayer. So before we get into our Bible study tonight, we're going to ask Warren to go ahead and lead us in our prayer. Let's bow together.
Our God, the Most High, Heavenly Father, we're thankful once again this week to come together at midweek to study your word, Lord. Open your book and to study what's there for us, Lord. We're so thankful for this opportunity we have. We pray for those who are not able to be with us this evening, those who are not feeling well, those who are traveling. Pray to be with each and every one of us for needs they have, Lord. We're thankful for your Son and our Savior Jesus, and we're thankful for this opportunity we have to do this evening. Be with us. Over your word, Lord. And we pray each of us can be edified and uplifted, further encouraged to study your word, Lord. We offer this prayer in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay. All right. The parable of the rich fool is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I know we're going to have a lot of good discussion. A lot of passages I'm sure are going to come to your mind. I've listed a number myself that we'll eventually get into this evening. But what we'll do is we'll first go ahead and read this parable. But just like last week's class about the question of why did Jesus tell that parable, it related to the verses before. And this is the same thing. So we're going to start in verse 13, even though I have 16 up here. We're going to read 13 through 21. And I'm going to jump over to the back corner. Mark, why don't you start us off and we'll go across and come up. Mark Nevins, Mark, I forgot about your vocal cords there. Go ahead, Laura, you can start.
Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you?"
Then he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses." Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully."
We're up to you, Mark.
And he thought within himself, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?" So he said, "I will do this. I will put down my barns and build greater. And there I will store all my crops in my place."
He said, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and goods.
That's okay.
And I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." So God said to him, "Fool, this very night your soul will depart of you, and now who will own what you have prepared?"
Just read one more. No.
So is the man who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God?
Okay. All right. Well, so we obviously know why Jesus went ahead and said this parable. Went on in verse 13 when it said, one from the crowd said, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." There's no indication that this was that it was wrong for this person to go ahead and expect his portion of the inheritance. There's nothing that implies that. He just wanted Jesus to go ahead and deal with it. It does deal with proper or an improper attitude towards things, and we're going to discuss that tonight. We all understand the danger with the love of money. Obviously, we're going to be talking about covetousness tonight. And so that's why he mentioned in verse 15, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses." On the question sheet, I went ahead and asked you this. A lot of it was probably copying some of the things that were said here. But I asked the question, to help us understand the main problem this man had, list the things that he was thinking. What were some of the things that he was thinking that it tells us here? And there's a common denominator throughout all of it. Nancy?
That he had a whole lot.
Okay.
He had 20, 20, more than enough.
Did you pick up on a pattern in what he was saying? Okay?
Well, he wasn't satisfied. He wanted more and more.
True, true. But did you pick up on any pronouns in there?
Oh, yeah, I, me, and mine.
Oh, it was all about him. You'll notice that. And that is a quality that we'll talk about a little bit later, is if you want to look for characteristics, some problems, and I'm really jumping right ahead to the end of the lesson. I don't want to do that. But if you're looking for signs of covetousness, and we're noticing it here with this person when he says, he thought within himself, what shall I do since I have no room to store my crops? I'll do this. I'll pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. Okay, let's talk about his plans. Anything wrong with his plans? Can you see anything good in his plans, first of all? Anything good in his plans? Nikki?
Trying to properly manage his
Wealth?
yeah, well,
Okay. Anything else positive you can notice about this? Going to try to prepare? Anything else? I don't know about you, but I think he's going to make a lot of workers happy, don't you think? Is he going to literally pull down the barns and build bigger? I mean, this guy's going to supply some employment for some people. That's a pretty good thing, right? And so I just want us to focus on that because, you know, there's some good things that you might do, that we might do, and justify ungodly behavior. We can deceive ourselves. Now, that's usually what happens when we do things that are wrong. We don't see that it's wrong, right? I mean, this guy doesn't see what he's doing is wrong. And that's like this person from the crowd said, hey, tell him, my brother, to divide that inheritance. Well, let me be a judge and arbitrator over this. That's not why I'm here. I like that. Now, did he actually say those words? Let's see what he says here. He said, man, who made me a judge and an arbitrator over you? Why was Jesus here if it wasn't to take care of matters like that? I mean, let's look at it from this guy's standpoint when he cries out, you know, there's some injustice here. You know, tell him to divide the inheritance with me. Misty?
It goes back to a common misconception the Jews had that this was about everything earthly.
Let's notice that, guys. You know, if all that we look at is our goods that we own, that's pretty pale. You probably want to see that. If we just focus on the physical, we're going to get ourselves in trouble if it's all about the physical. Do you know, maybe personally, I mean personally, you may have heard of this. Are you familiar with when there's been a death in the family that it has torn families apart? You've heard of it. I've heard of it. I've seen families that are like, you know, before the death, they're like this. After the death, they don't even speak to each other. Why? Because of the physical things. That is so important. And I see Jesus bringing that out in this particular text. And so when I read this, now, again, we need to make sure that we don't read more into it than the Lord intended. Is this passage teaching us that it's wrong to get rich? How do you know? Well, it just seems to be like, well, here's a guy who's got a lot. I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to make bigger barns, and I'm just put up my feet. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. I'll just have all the comforts. How do you know he's not saying there's something wrong with being rich here? Misty, then Amy.
Well, in verse 21, he says, so is it going to be with anybody else who stores it for themselves, but they're not rich towards God.
Okay.
It wasn't about the physical wealth. It was about there was no wealth spiritually.
And I want us to spend a lot of time on that. What were you going to say, Amy?
that was it.
Same kind of thing. Now, obviously, we're not saying it's wrong to be rich. Now, how do you know it's not wrong to be rich, though? And then, how do we know that? So if you were to tell somebody it's not wrong to be rich,
Solomon was wealthy.
What's that?
Solomon was wealthy. David was wealthy.
Jonah.
Abraham.
Yeah, I mean, you think of some great men of the Old Testament you guys are talking about, Mark. Read on, okay? Where your treasures there, your heart may be also. I was talking about physically, though. I mean, were there people that were physically rich? Is it wrong to be rich? It's, you know, there are times when people might look down on rich people. You know, there are people who can be prejudiced looking down on poor people. There are people who can be looking down on rich people and just make assumptions about them, right? They're snobs because they have money. Mark?
I was gonna say, if it was wrong, God would have told us so. But now he's also told us that it brings difficulties. Because it's, you know, like Jesus said, it was easier for the camel to pass in the eye of needle than just for a rich man to enter the kingdom. So.
There's lots.
But with God, all things are possible, so.
Exactly right. You guys know this. You're probably thinking some other passage, and by all means, bring them up. I've got 1 Timothy chapter 6. You knew we were going to go there sooner or later. Verse 10 says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness," and we're going to be talking about that tonight, "in their greediness, and pierce themselves with many sorrows." And so, yeah, it's not wrong to be rich. The problem comes if you have a love of that one.
Well, you know, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is.
And there are what we would classify, we're middle, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But there are people who are really, quote, poor, who are really covetous, who really do for themselves rather than their family. They'll take advantage of what little opportunity they have, and they're worse than some rich people.
Oh,
Because they may have children at home and they're doing things with their money, what little they have. Short story, back years ago, when we were on drunk, we had a health and safety guy set up to help people who were destitute.
right, right.
It wasn't a fund to help during this, the first week, he said, that's the worst job I ever had.
All right.
Because mothers came in with their children, no food.
Right.
But my point is this, to be covetous, to be stingy, greedy, doesn't necessarily you don't have to be rich.
Exactly. That's exactly true. Let's face it, guys. Are the rich people fun? You know, are they the ones that are going out? And, of course, I don't know if you even know it. I don't. But I've read statistics on this. But is it the rich that are going out there buying all the lotto tickets?
No.
Yeah. It's the poor people. The people just don't have much, but want it. Okay. And Warren is 100% right. When we study this parable tonight, it's not like, well, you know, I'm not rich, I'm not loaded, so I don't have any problems with this. Man, you can be dirt poor and have every problem this guy has. Every problem that he talks about in this parable. Nikki.
I also think we need to remember that poor is not usually what we think of as poor. Like in the United States, poor, you usually still have electricity and running water, and you've at least got food stamps to feed yourself, and you know there are all kinds of assistance programs. Very few people that we know are actually poor.
Right.
You know, all of us would still be, probably even by their standards, considered very wealthy.
Oh, when Debbie and I went to China, man, I told Debbie we could sell our house, move to this small town, and we'd live like a king and queen. I mean, obviously, everything's relative, as you guys are talking about. And that's why even when I preached on this, you know, somebody says, well, I'm not really rich. Well, are you poor? Well, I don't think you're poor. If you got a roof over your head, I think somebody did some commercial on that, you know, like if you've got a roof over your head, you're better off than so many people in this whole world, right? And the statistics that are there. If you have running water, or if you have a bed to sleep on, you know, just using that in comparison. Okay, now the thing that really jumps out at me in this, and I think that the 1 Timothy chapter 6, I read verse 10, but I want to back up a little bit in this chapter because it also talked a little bit about greediness. It said in verse 6, now godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, this is something that we need to come to grips with as Christians. Because people are talking about, well, I need to be content. And so if I get a job and I'm on the first rung of the ladder, do I dare take the next step? Should I be content with that? So let's talk a little bit about what is this godliness with contentment is great gain in this idea when we talk about this problem here with covetousness. I need to tear down my barns and build bigger barns. If you have a developer here and he buys this chunk of land, well, don't buy any more land and build more houses. Well, that's his job. We know it's not wrong to gain more income. So where does the contentment come in? What's your take on that? I mean, we better understand this or we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Nikki?
I think it's kind of the attitude, not being a workaholic, not being so driven to make more money that you're willing to neglect more important things like your family and God.
Okay. What were you saying, Amy? Was it you?
I was thinking, sorry. I didn't have my
You were
hand, but I was
thinking.
thinking.
Okay. And I think that's what we're talking about here. Where is your focus? Because remember, store your treasures up in heaven, which was the last verse. He also mentioned that in verse 21. It was the same thing that Mark mentioned in verse 34. Verse 21 in our reading was, so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. You need to store treasures up in heaven. What are you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that it also depends on to what end are you trying to make money? Are you making money to live comfortably? Are you making money just to make more money? There is a point at which that you lose your focus. Why are you trying to make more money?
You're right. And so when we get back to this concept of being covetous, guys, when you think of somebody that's covetous, let's use the term materialistic. What quality jumps out at you with them? Or ourselves? What is the quality that's not good? Amy?
Always having to have like the new thing, the best thing. Because even if it's sort of like with cell phones, new cell phones come out every year. And even if your cell phone works perfectly, there's a new cell phone and I have to have it.
Right. I'm not picking on any gender here. Okay. But if your heart starts to pound when you read this word, you're hooked. It's a sale though. You don't need it. But I got it for practically nothing. What did you buy? I had to have it. I mean, it was crazy not to. There are things that I'm going to tell you, folks. Materialism. Have you ever heard of the term shopaholic? Anybody here ever heard of that term? I mean, am I making this up? Is there such thing as a shopaholic? What's that?
Me too.
What is a shopaholic?
Someone who has an actual addiction to shopping. They get a hormone release from spending money, and it's actually an addiction.
That's it. I mean, we say, well, that's not me. Okay, it can have degrees, all right? And we need to ask ourselves, are we the type of people who allow, it's like being out of control. You talk about an addiction. It's like, it can be any kind of addiction, a food addiction. Do I control myself or does it control me? Do I control my wallet or does my wallet control me? As soon as I get money in it, I got to spend it. I'm out of control. Covetous person, learning contentment is part of our lives because that's where he talks about godliness and it being great gain. Jess?
Being content makes me think of also having good patience. I believe it's, I don't know what the statistic is, but I've heard it, back in the day, our parents or grandparents, they had to work for a whole lot to get, their house and all their furniture and their cars and everything. And then the kids grow up and they expect all of that immediately upon, adulthood, instead of all the many years it took for their parents to accumulate all that.
Okay.
And now, everyone's entitled to everything now.
That's it. And didn't Paul deal with that? What did he say about the person who didn't work? Doesn't deserve to eat. What about the man who doesn't provide for his own? Worse than an infidel. Okay, and so there needs to be that You need to have ambition. I like what Jesse's talking about here, that attitude of entitlement that I just want this. Why would you go out and buy that when you've got a rent payment due? Why would you do this when you know you need gas for the car? Why would you do this when the baby needs food? You know, you're sitting there going, you're not thinking properly. And this is the problem with covetousness, because as we started out in reading about this man, people who are greedy, people who are covetous, I can't think of another word other than being selfish. You're satisfying your desires. It's all about you. You're not thinking about having enough that you can give to the poor, that you can be, that you can help the needy, that you can give to others. You're not seeing any of that here. It's all about me, 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 me. And I've got 25 hands here, so let's go across this way. Nancy?
But it's where people, they always buy everything they want. They never put any thought into what they need.
Well, and that's what gets crossed up, right? That's what gets crossed up. Dave?
When you're talking about more and more, it's like a person that puts want before need. And two things I call it is greed and slipping covetousness.
I thought you were going to say this word. Really? I mean, you're being a fool. That's what Jesus talks about here. I mean, you're not being wise. I mean, it takes a lot of wisdom to handle what we have today. And let's say it. I've said it before, and let's say it again tonight. And that is, you don't have to sit back and think what you would do if you got $1 million. Because if you can't use what you have now properly, you're not going to use if you get $1 million properly. I guarantee you, if water pours through your fingers if money pours through your fingers like water now, it will if you have $1 million. And I guarantee you, you won't have it a year from now. Because people just spend. Because it's all about me. And that's the danger with all of this. And I saw Misty, what were you going to say?
One of the translations I have replaces contentment with satisfied with what they have.
That's it.
It's a really good definition for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess somebody was talking about that with Nikki. It's like you get something, but you're not content with that. I got to go get another one. I've got to get that high or whatever it might be, Matt.
Well, I think that there's the flip side where you love money so much that you won't spend it. You can accumulate all the money you want, and it's not going to do you any good once you die. So there is that balance between living for now and the future.
Right.
And I think, we focus on so much that people want to spend and they are the shopaholics and everything, but you have the flip side where people will never spend. They will never part with a single penny or a nickel or a dime, and that's just as bad.
And we're going to read about that. We're going to read about how, vanity plays into this in the book of Ecclesiastes. So we'll look at that. Dave?
Budget, living within your means. I believe that's what the scriptures teach us to do.
Well, if you don't live within your means, if you buy something you can't afford, or if you just charge it, isn't it stealing? Seriously, if you have no intention of paying back, if you can't pay it back, I mean, what's your motive for that? Living within your means, obviously, and understanding the difference between wants, and you guys talked about it, and needs, okay? And at the same token, learning contentment. Nothing wrong with bettering ourselves or gaining more. But I tell you, the lesson for us, for all of us, is to see the problems that it creates. Now, I want us to look at this guy now, because it's question number 4. When you look at this guy, not only did I tell you what did he say about himself, like what were his thoughts, but the next question was, state as many problems you can see that this man had. What are some definite problems you see that he had here in this parable? We've already mentioned a bunch of them, Amy.
He's got all of this stuff, but he doesn't look to consult anybody about making this big decision. He's like, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do, this is what's best, without consulting on what would actually be best to do.
Right, and that reminds me of some of the Proverbs, that, a wise person will go to another person for advice. If you ignore other people, you're just going to get yourself in trouble. Trey.
And
we know that he was talking about, food, which we know is perishable. And there were probably lots of starving people that could have benefited from him being generous to share.
That's right. You're seeing a lack of generosity here. You're seeing a lot of, and we've said the word probably 10 times tonight, a lot of self-centeredness going on here. When I think of a Christian, the way they're supposed to be with their goods, I think we see it in Acts 2. I think early on, right? I mean, people would sell their lands, people would sell what they had, their possessions, and immediately help those that are in need. Why? Because they're looking beyond. They want to store their treasures up in heaven, and they have that caring attitude. And I think a big thing that we notice about this guy, and you guys touched on it briefly, he's not looking to the future. He's not thinking far enough. You guys might think about the future, right? Think about retirement at all, Brian? Ever think about retirement? Well, that's kind of in the future, right? But what are we really looking at? Heaven. I mean, our ultimate reward. And I don't want to allow, and that's why these lessons are so profitable for us. I don't want to miss heaven because of focusing on the goods of this world, the physical things. I'm telling you, physical things can destroy your life. And that's what he's trying to bring out here in this story. Now, I want to ask you a question. I already mentioned it earlier. Why would Jesus call him a fool? Why? That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong. Why call him a fool? Misty?
I can think of a couple of reasons. One, his focus was here and not on heavenly things. But even more than that, I mean, it comes across as if he made a wise decision to store this up in the barns because he's got a lot of goods. He would have had more had he sold it.
Okay. Right.
I mean, when you think about it, because as Trey said, it's perishable.
It is. That's
Even
right.
if he hadn't shared and given away, sold it, even at a discount, he would have had more than just storing it in the barns.
And yeah, even in that parable, you think about it in a physical sense for you and I today. What are you going to do with that? I sometimes think to myself, when I hear about some sports guy just signed a contract for $300 million, I'm saying, how could you spend that much? Do you really need that much? I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just saying, like Missy's talking about, you get so much. Why? What is it? You can't buy your way into heaven. And I think that learning a little bit about why the word fool was used, let's go to the text. Look what he puts it in its context. He said, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. What was he not thinking about? He's not thinking about the uncertainty of life. I don't care how rich you are. You may buy the best doctors in the world. You're going to die someday. And you can't guarantee you're not going to get sick. There's no guarantees. But that's the problem when we focus just on the world and our jobs and our families. If we're just focusing on that, we're not thinking about the spiritual things and storing our treasures up in heaven that we've got to talk about yet tonight. If we don't think about those things, we're almost acting like I've got time. Because you noticed in the parable, what did he say about the future? He said something. This fool said something about his future. Did you catch it?
Set for years.
Yeah. He says, I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. You've got it made for many. Who said you've got many years? Now, we have retirements, right? You plan for it. Are you guaranteed it? No. It's funny. For the first time when I'm studying this, I couldn't help but think about some stories. And maybe Warren told me about this, or somebody else told me about a co-worker that worked a lot of hours and then died shortly after retirement. And I'm thinking, I might look at that story and go, man, what a shame. But looking at this parable and learning the lesson that our Lord wants for me, if I get to the point where I finally tell the brother, this is my last sermon, I'm going to spend more time with the grandkids, and I have a heart attack the next day and I die, from a Christian perspective, it's not so bad. Because if I've served the Lord faithfully and I've enjoyed, I've had contentment, I've loved my life, I wasn't putting all my stock into my last sermon, when I don't have to do it anymore. That's never going to happen. But the point is, it's different. But if your focus is just this, the goods of this world, that is kind of a sad story, isn't it? Overtime, working, making all this money. You're finally going to retire, and then you don't. It sounds kind of sad. But not for the person who's content, yes?
Big thing nowadays in companies is, a work-life balance, work-home life balance.
Right.
And that's one thing that's hard for me is that, especially here at the beginning stages of my career, having to balance contentment and balance stuff with my family and everything, while also still trying to succeed and get ahead in life and everything. So that's something that I struggle with.
Right, and I think you've touched on something that we have to address, because I think that when you're trying to balance your job and trying to get ahead and your family and the spiritual, I think what the spiritual does, it helps us make the proper decisions. When we're trying to get ahead, is this best for my family? When somebody says, you know what, I can get a promotion, I can make triple the money, honey, we're going to go over here. There's not a church around. Wise or unwise? And I've seen this happen with Brett, dear friend of mine. And it just wasn't wise. But the money was huge. And so, Jess, I think that you're learning as you grow as a Christian, and as the head of the house and the decisions you want to make in the careers, you're going to make decisions. But I almost hate to use you as the illustration, because I don't want you moving. We've had too many people move. But if you had a chance, you said the church is strong there. It'll help us a little bit better. But you've considered all the spiritual parts of it, right? And I think that's what any of us would do, really, what any of us would do. Dave?
Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So if you're working for the Lord and giving to the Lord, then everything else should fall in place.
Yeah, and that's what he said. The person that lays up treasure for himself, he's not rich towards God. That's what he was saying. You're just not rich towards God. You say, well, Chuck, I thought you just said a moment ago that you can be rich and still be a Christian. You can still be rich and be a Christian. He says, he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. There's the answer. The person that is wealthy and doesn't think about God, who's not wanting to make him a priority. Tony, you had your hand up a half hour ago. What was it?
I was just, maybe the arrogance of it, and he never gives God anything that I offer.
Isn't that the truth? Look at I've done. And I'm glad you brought that up, Tony, because we didn't talk about it. Because he says, it's all about him. See, the ground of a certain man yielded plentifully. The ground. You can be thankful for the rain, the sunshine. What did you actually get out there and make that plant grow? You didn't do it. Farmers, I think, really godly farmers are thankful. We joke about that. They might not get enough rain, but the point is that they're reliant. They rely on God, the way he created this world with the seasons. You're right, Tony. Arrogance. So as we continue on in this, I asked this very important question. Let's try to identify some early signs that reveals covetousness. Does anybody here want to be covetous? David? Anybody here want to be materialistic? David? But what are some signs? What are some indications? Maybe from this, you can use this parable and think of some other passages, some things we talked. What are some signs that we are being covetous, EJ?
I don't know about that but can you tie 9 in, 1 Timothy 6:9, can that be tied into it?
What's that, EJ?
I see a lot of that.
What part?
Let's see, 6:9, 1 Timothy 6:9.
And it reads?
But they that will be rich fall into temptations and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown in destruction and perdition.
Okay, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, you want a sign or an indication you're having problems with covetousness is that your love for stuff causes you to engage in ungodly things. You guys might be thinking of some specifics, but I think there are times when you can be so greedy, you're not concerned about the law. I remember having a guy get really upset with me one time when he did something. Well, some church needed some signs, and I asked him for a receipt. Huh? He wanted that under the table. That's how you get ahead, EJ.
Okay, you're talking about quick money.
Right.
They're not thinking about, if you don't deliver my product, I'm going to kill you or your family members. They're not thinking about the consequences that mess with that 4-letter word that everybody wants a quick buck.
Yeah, everybody wants it quick and easy. And that's a good lesson on gambling, the problem with it. People don't want to work for a living. If a man doesn't work, he doesn't deserve to eat. Well, I'm out there buying my tickets. It's sin for a lot of reasons. Okay, gambling is sinful for a lot of reasons. But I'm going to tell you something. You want a symptom of covetousness? Gambling. You know, a person that wants a lot quick without working for it, not earning it. EJ?
I was talking about the I'll call them dealers. They go around to the schools and they get these little young kids, these little young boys to run stuff. The 4-letter word start with a D, ends with an E for them. They're underage, and they know if police catch them, they have to let them go or take them to juvenile court. Those are the ones that's really getting rich because the pants are hanging down past their butts.
Yeah, but what we're talking about, EJ, what we're talking about in this class is the dangers for you and I becoming covetous, okay? I'm not talking about people making rich money off of drug dealers and stuff. I'm talking about us. What are some qualities in our lives that demonstrate that we're having a problem with covetousness? Nicole.
I was thinking about focus, and I think that is the first indicator of if we're becoming covetous. Like, what are we spending our time on and our energy on? You know, are we too busy working all day long that we don't read our Bibles or pray like we should, or we don't spend time with our brothers and sisters, and we just say, well, I'm working, you know, I'm busy. And, you know, what's your focus? Right. What is most important to you? Because you will always make time for what's important to you. So when we start to become materialistic, then, you know, those things don't become important to us.
That's exactly right. We need to look for that sign. Amy?
I think when we allow ourselves to become envious of what others have, and we see, oh, I really like what so-and-so has, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And it starts to eat away at you.
It's true. It can ruin your life because you have that, you know, the grass is always greener. I want to be like so-and-so. I want somebody else's life. You know, and Debbie and I have talked about this before, even some people that I absolutely admire to the utmost, their spirituality. I love them dearly and their abilities. But yet, Debbie and I talked about, I said, but would I want to switch lives? Would I want his life? No. He went through some tough times that I wouldn't want to go through that. Losing the son. You know, but it's like you say, can we be content and have our focus right? Mitzi, then Nikki, and then Warren.
Something that stands out to me about this character is that throughout his story, you never once hear them talk about family or friends or about anybody else, you know, in his circle of influence. And I think that that's a sign for us, if our circle never expands out to include other people,
Right.
there's something wrong.
You're right, thank you.
You're talking about, signs that we are, getting covetous and everything.
Right.
I think when you start to have strained relationships with other Christians because of what they have, and you get a sense of bitterness about it, like, well, why did they just buy that big of a house? Like, why are they making that much more money than me? I can't believe they bought that new car,
It's
They
true.
shouldn't be spending that kind of money.
And again, looking down on other people because of their success, how sad is that? Really, Warren? Yeah.
Credit card.
Mm.
In our society today. I think young people in particular, some of them haven't had it.
Right.
So they don't understand what they're getting into.
Exactly right.
But as we get older, we should learn how to control that.
Mhm.
But your credit card bill comes and it's staggering.
Yeah.
Maxed out. There's a problem. And that doesn't happen, I'm not throwing that to everybody.
I agree.
Some people fall in situations, they gotta do that.
Yeah.
For a short period. I'm with that. I'm talking about consistently.
Exactly.
Every month, and it keeps building. There's something wrong.
You're right. You're exactly right. And I appreciate that because this, discussing these are real issues. And I'm not talking about, I don't have any money and I needed to feed the kids, and so I put it on the card, and a tragedy came up or an emergency came up and we needed heat in the wintertime. I'm not talking about that. You weren't talking about that. We are talking about people going out and charging wants on things. I'm going to tell you something. You charge things that you want and you put it on a credit card and you don't have the money to pay for it. It's wrong. You understand? You didn't have the money for it. What if you didn't have that? Well, I wouldn't have got it then. Well, why did you get it? Well, because I had the card. You can't afford it, you don't buy it. And then that's dangerous. But they're thinking. Now people say, oh, wait a minute, said Chuck. You have a mortgage payment on your house. You couldn't afford it, so why are you doing that? You're being inconsistent. No. There is a budget, and I can afford it within the budget. Most people will tell you, if you work at a place and you get $5 an hour, and you're working 20 hours a week, and you go into the bank and you want to borrow money to buy a house, they're not giving you money. Okay. So you need to understand what I'm talking about here. And so it gets back to this attitude, this danger. We're talking about signs of covetousness. We have to be aware of it. I saw another hand. Mark, was it yours? No, it wasn't yours. Oh, yeah, it was you.
Another sign, like when you give weekly and you don't give willingly and you don't, you begrudgingly about it and you feel, or like when we collect money for flowers. Oh, I gotta give more money for flowers because somebody passed away. Well, it really means a lot from the person that their family received the flowers from, and it's it's just things
You're
like
absolutely right. I'm thinking of some big things, but it can be small things. We're talking about those small signs. And just people that don't want to share, like you're talking about. They don't want to share. And that's dangerous. And that mindset can creep into us, guys, and money can control us, and that is the danger. I've got a minute left here, and I did ask you guys the last question. Does this parable kind of remind you of another parable? What other parable does this remind you of?
That rich guy that ran up to Jesus and said, Master, what can I do to follow you? And he told him, and he cut the attitude and walked away.
There you go, because he didn't want to do what was required of him. Go sell all you have, give to the poor, come and follow me. And he went away sorrowfully because he was rich. And I'm going to tell you, somebody quoted it earlier. It's easier for a rich man to go to the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Quote that wrong. No, it's easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. I don't even know what I said. I'll have to go back and listen to it. So there is that danger. Thank you guys for your comments. I really appreciate it. Good stuff.
So I was thinking.
I mean, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, we got it.
You told me to say something.
Brian was covered.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't know. But
He called me on my way here and said, I'm sorry.
Where are we on Sunday? What's our Sunday morning class?
I actually would be so good at it.
She ran
Hey, you were not. I'm doing like a verse mapping now. I said if I just start at the verse, you're going to start at something. But you one verse a day. I might finish.
If you would mark your songbooks to number 655, number 655. We'll use that as the song of encouragement at the appropriate time. And after you have that mark, open your songbooks up to number 394, number 394. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarm. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning,
safe and secure from all alarms, leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Pinch hitting for Mark Nevins tonight. His voice isn't well. Hope he gets feeling better soon. But have your psalm books ready. We're going to be singing that song of invitation in a moment. And I thought it would be appropriate tonight that I talk about a song of invitation. What sparked this was I received a phone call. And you guys have been mailing out your bulletins, and I received a phone call. You mailed out to a good friend of mine, and he called up and said, I just got the letter. I want you to know, keep sending it. And since I got you on the phone, I want to ask you a question. And he says, I've been a little disturbed lately. He said, where in the Bible does it say anything about offering an invitational song? You know, you pride yourself, we pride ourselves as members of the church of having biblical authority for everything that we do. And it's starting to bother me when they get up and they sing an invitation song. And I said, well, let's just think about it for a minute. Okay. First of all, I mentioned Ephesians chapter 5, and we talked about the responsibility that we have to sing. And he tells us in verse 19, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing a meek melody in your heart to the Lord. The Colossian passage in Colossians 3, verse 16, actually talks about teaching and admonishing. We teach when we sing. I told him on the phone, I said, you know, this kind of reminds me of years ago, I was in a congregation where I told the members that we're going to start a study on the chronological life of Jesus. And after I announced that and the class was over, one of the men took me aside and he said, tell me in the Bible, where does it say chronological? I said, the word just means in order. We're going to study the life of Jesus in order. Well, chronological is not in the Bible. Well, that's true. That's true. When you talk about an invitation song, I told him, I says, we have the responsibility, and I want you to think about this thing because it is an invitation. If you're not a Christian, it is our responsibility to invite you, to encourage you to become one. Where's that? Mark 16:16. Well, verse 15. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. The commission in Matthew 28? Yeah, got it right. 28, 19 and 20. Go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you, and lo, I'm with you to the end of the age. Now, listen, our responsibility is to encourage people to become Christians. I'm going to tell you something. It should bother you if people are not invited. It should bother you if people just pass over it. And I want you to understand something. That is happening. That is happening in places. Bible study is over, and they just say, let's stand, we're going to sing a song, we're done. I don't know the hearts of you, and we never know the hearts of the people that we're with. Something was said in a Bible class. What makes the closing song any different than the opening song? Where's the passage that says lead an opening song? Well, there's got to be a first song, right? I had to explain, and you guys know this, the difference between generic authority and specific authority. I told him, I says, the Bible is perfectly clear that we are to sing. It doesn't say how many songs. So that's general. I don't care how many songs you sing. The specific is you sing spiritual songs. And so when we're talking about a closing song, like call it a closing song, whatever, but it's a spiritual song. We're going to sing at the end, and it's an opportunity for those people who have not responded to the gospel can do so. Now, we want to make this perfectly clear, too. Is that we don't want people to think that, you know what, once that song is over and you didn't respond during that song, you don't get to respond. There's something wrong if we convey that idea. We want them to know after the prayer, we're sitting around talking, and I have seen that time and time again, where they get into a conversation after Bible study, and somebody says, hey, wait a minute, everybody. Somebody just decided they wanted to obey. Well, they didn't do it during the invitation song. Well, it's just a closing song that provides the opportunity. Is there authority for it? Absolutely. I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to confuse the issue anymore. He understood and said, okay, thanks, enough. I think I gave him more than he wanted. But I could have brought up, where's the passage that says, lead a Lord's Supper song? I mean, if you're having problems, you're going to have problems with a lot of different. And so I wanted to understand that authority was being respected, that nobody was doing anything wrong, but they needed to make sure that people know that you can obey the gospel anytime, anywhere, when you are ready, as what's happened here recently. When I was in the car, and then when I got home and I was able to talk, well, I wasn't home, I was up north, but when I called Mark from Chicago, you know, I wasn't upset. I didn't go, well, why didn't she do it on Sunday during the invitation? Well, that's silly to say that. Anywhere, anytime. And what I'm saying is, tonight, if you're not a Christian, what we're teaching, we're admonishing one another in song, we're praising God, but we're providing an opportunity for you to obey the gospel before it's too late. This might be the last invitation you ever hear. Think about that. Think about that. This could be the last invitation you ever hear. And for you to pass it up when you know you need to obey, what a burden to carry for eternity. And so, if you're subject, if you need to study some, we'll open up our Bibles, we'll go over it. You're questioning whether you're right with the Lord. If you're a child of God that's gone wayward, you need to come back. You need the prayers of the congregation. That's also an invitational song. We invite brethren, if there's something heaviness on your heart, we need the prayers of the congregation. You do that also. We are family here. So if you're subject in any way, let it be known as we stand together and sing this.
There's a fountain free is for you and me. Let us haste away to the spring. There's a fount of love from the source above, and He bids us all freely drink. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a living stream with the crystal gleam from the throne of life now it flows. While the waters roll, let the weary soul hear the call that forth freely goes. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a heart that's wept and the soul is left, that may God is good want to share. 'Tis for you and me, and its stream I see. Let us hasten joyfully there. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. open for all.
Please be seated for a minute. Zach wanted me to read this letter to the congregation here. The river, he addressed it to the River Ridge Church of Christ. And I'll just read it. I asked him if he wanted to read it. He said, will you read it? I said, sure. He says, I'm truly sorry, but I am the one who wrote on the back wall with a key, but I did not write in that. Also, I'm sorry for lying about it and ruining my parents' reputation. I assured him that we didn't do this. We didn't ruin his reputation. But I appreciate the fact that he's willing to admit it. Also, if there's anything I can do around the church, let me know how to fix it or something else, and that's that. So, well, we appreciate that. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. It's something we took care of, all right? It's history. It's behind us. That's the main thing. We appreciate you guys admitting that. And as far as we're concerned, we're moving forward. It's history. It will not be brought up again. Okay? I just want you to know that. We're gonna have a word of prayer at this time, and so let's bow together to go to God. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for we've had to come here tonight to study your word. Encouraged by that. We're so thankful, Father, for the willingness of this individual, Zach, who acknowledged something that he did that was wrong. And we pray, Father, that you continue to do it with him as he continues his study of your word. And may we be an encouragement to him and help him along in that endeavor. We want to help people get to heaven. That's the goal. We understand, Father, none of us are perfect. We understand that, but we are striving to do your will. We know you are a forgiving God, and we need to be a forgiving people. And so we just pray as a church that we will be an example to Zach and help him in making right decisions for his relationship in the future with you. We pray for wisdom. We pray for strength. Help this congregation as we move forward, Father. We're just so grateful for the work you've given us to do. We're thankful for everybody that is here tonight. Continue to look over us and keep us in your care. We love you. Help us to be more like your Son every day. And we offer this prayer in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Hey, come see me.